Welcome to the Mink and the Monk, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Our guest today is the legendary Bill Ware, who I'm very glad was down to join us for the podcast today. And I'm astounded the more I look online at all the things you've done. You've been a very, very prolific sideman in many genres, and you've done film scoring, you've done orchestral works, very historically important jazz and hip-hop records, many records of your own, and again, thank you for being here today, Will.
Yeah, it's
Bill.
nice to be here. In the mountains.
Yeah, I saw that you were from around here, and it's tough to get people out to Kerhonks in New York sometimes for an interview. So we were very fortunate that you were close by and willing to talk with us. And you seem just so busy, so I don't know how you fit in the schedule. I was listening to your albums on Apple Music, and a lot of them say 2022 on them. Have you been re-releasing old stuff, or did you just put out like 4 albums last year?
No, well, actually, I had from 2006 or so, no, even earlier than that, 2003, I started recording stuff at home and writing stuff. And then right around that time, I lost one of my record deals with the record label 8 Ball. They kind of folded, and Groove Collective, I left that band. I stopped recording with them. So I just started recording all my own stuff. And then slowly through the years, fast forward to like 2020, 2022, I had amassed about, I don't know, maybe 14 or 15 CDs worth of music.
Wow.
So I just started. And then 2016, when Trump got elected, I thought, oh man, this is going to be a rough 4 years. So I'm going to need a project to distract me from the insanity. So I decided I was going to write 2,000 songs. And so I started that. And right around that time, I also started this weird mystery illness that I had started. And so I started writing songs, and I wrote like the first 2, and I set up this whole criterion of I'm going to write songs that are in my wheelhouse in terms of playing, because I usually write music that's way too hard for me to like raise my own level. But I might do something different. So I'm gonna write stuff that's like right in my wheelhouse, and I made all these criteria. Like, okay, I'm gonna write basically for like a vibraphone piano quartet, basically, and then I'm gonna write, like, I have to finish a whole demo and have the chart, a lead sheet of the chart, and have the complete demo, all 4 pieces, 4 or 5 pieces in a completed demo. So that was the criterion. So I did a couple, and it took me, the first couple of songs took me 2 days. And then I figured out, okay, if I'm gonna write 1,000 songs in 4 years, that's 250 songs a year. And when I did all the math, I was like, I'll be doing this. It takes me about 9 hours to complete. So I figured, I think I had 20 days off for the year. Perfect.
Yeah.
And I got busy, and I got about, it took me, I think a year. The first year I wrote about 200. First year and maybe it was about 14 months. I wrote about 200, just over 200 songs. And I was like, wow. And I had a stack of papers, like 6 inches.
Yeah. So that, if I'm doing the math, that's about every 2 days you're writing a song? Is that?
Yeah, about, by the time, wow. By the end, I had it down for about a day and a third to write a full song, have the completed demo, just of the head. It's mostly jazz songs. just at the head, and that was the demo. So each demo was like 30 seconds, whatever.
Oh, I got you.
So it's just the head, but all finished, like completed, with the whole arrangement and everything. So took about by the end I was down to about a day and a third, and it was quite an experience, just forcing yourself to write. And what surprised me was I was expecting I have 1,000 songs, I'll be lucky if like 200 of them are good. You figure spitting them out like that, like a machine. But what I found is I'm a weird guy, so I don't like to. If you're going to work on something all day, it's got to be good. Otherwise, you're going to lose interest after an hour. You're going to be like, ugh. So I didn't write any schlock. Every tune I really put my heart into, and I surprised myself like finding avenues to go down. Like I would take a traditional jazz song like John Coltrane's "Moment's Notice," and then I would do what I call build a better car. You're like, okay, I'm going to take this song, figure out what makes it what it is, and then see if I can come out with a better version. I say better, but it's so subjective. Just another, like an alternate version. This is really cool. Like Moments Notice, da 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 ba ba da ba ba da. Okay, what makes that song is that it's really a nice drummer's kind of thing, 'cause it's got all those kicks and hits. So I wanted to keep that element, and then it has that little like little perfect little break that sets up the solo, and it sets up the head to come back. So I wanted to keep that. So I pick elements out of the tune, and then I'm going to make a better blues. I'm going to make it somehow make it my own. So then I changed the harmony, changed the melody, and I came up with a new song. We're going to play it this Saturday with great drummers in town. He lives in Europe, Steve Williams. I guess one of his top gigs, plays with Shirley Horn. And he sat in with my quartet a couple of weeks back when I did Matt Garrity has a Matt Garrity, he has
the Barnstock,
right?
Yep.
Yeah, he does a jazz stock there at his house, Barnstock, and I did one of those concerts, and Steve was there. He sat in, he said, "Man, I want to play with you." I said, "I want to play with you too." So next time he was in town, it was just this Saturday, he's going to be around. So we organized a gig really quick. And
where are you playing on Saturday? Not that this will be out by then, but
yeah, it won't be out. It's in Greenwood Lake, I think, but I don't know the name of the venue. Okay. It's through the is it the Rockland County, Hudson County Jazz?
So it's near Westchester, kind of thing. Okay.
This is the thing. When we don't manage your affairs anymore, you don't know anything. I just know 12 things now.
Sounds relaxing. I wish.
C sharp, D, D sharp, E. And my manager, wife, lawyer, driver, laundress, cook, chef, life coach. She does everything else.
So back on the topic of your compositions,
Okay.
You're saying how you approach coming up with like a thing about other tunes that you like to add in to keep it fresh. I feel like you get on so many standards gigs. I mean, I'm younger. I'm playing up in like the local Capital District scene, and there's definitely some people that you play with, especially in a smaller scene, who it feels like they're just calling the standards and doing them all the same way. Like, oh, everyone gets a solo, and then it's trade fours and everything. It just feels like a lot of 32 bar tunes. And your tunes, what I appreciate is everything I listened to, it felt like you were trying to add those extra little character bits to the composition, so that there's a form that has a melody to itself, and like the hits and the rhythm, and it's very hip and fresh improvisational music, and I appreciate that. I can hear it in what you put into the compositions. Is that something that when you decided to write all those tunes, was that a new thing for you, or have you been writing for most of your career?
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Like some of my friends, like, "Oh, Bill, you're the greatest vibraphone player." I saw an interview once with Wes Montgomery, or heard an interview. It was a radio interview with Wes Montgomery, and he was saying how he doesn't consider himself a great guitar player. He loves music. He expresses his music through the guitar. But he said, if you want to hear a great guitar player, you got to listen to this guy. He said, his name Nelson Simmons from Montreal, Canada. He's the greatest guitarist I ever heard.
I never heard of the
guy.
Yeah.
So I looked him up, and sure enough, this guy, there was a few U2s he didn't record. He recorded like 2 records, I think, maybe, that I could find. And there's some video of him. He mostly did live gigs. His brother, I think, owned a club, so he played there a lot.
I'll have to check him. I'll have to look that up.
Look this guy up, because he would play bebop lines, right, at tempo, up tempo, but with chords. He would play the lines and harmonize every note.
Whole line.
Harmonize every note of the line with chords. I was like, no wonder why Wes Montgomery was blown away. Man, this guy is ridiculous. But I'm kind of the similar way. I am self-taught in vibes, although I had lots of instruction from a lot of great vibraphonists, Wilson Morman, Jay Hogard, Milt Jackson came by and saw me play it. He's a very shy guy. He said about 4 words the whole time. But watched him play for years, studied his playing, and Gary Burton. And so had a lot of influx from a lot of people. But basically, I'm kind of self-taught. I took a year of marimba lessons to learn articulation from a classical guy. But I express myself through the vibes. But I think mainly I would consider my strength is as a composer. So I never really liked where all my friends were playing along with records and copying, what they heard in the records, and playing a lot of songs. I liked constructing stuff.
Almost like a producer.
Yeah, I really liked constructing music. Like, I love just putting it together, my own things, Even when I, much to my classical conductors, excuse me, chagrin, even in orchestra, I would analyze the music and put the chords in on the orchestral pieces, so that when I had rests, I could still play. So I'm like, all these rests, I don't want to rest, I want to play. So in the rests, I would fill in the chords, and I would come up with parts, new parts.
Miming bass?
Yeah, I played bass in orchestra and percussion in orchestra and in the band, because there weren't enough bass players. So I learned bass because the orchestra needed more bass players.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm a bassist. I didn't even know you played bass.
Yeah. So yeah, mostly when I was in New Jersey, I grew up in Jersey. I grew up mostly. I was born in East Orange, but I moved to Maplewood in '66, and I grew up in Maplewood, New Jersey. So, but I started on piano. And I just played by ear, because we had 2 pianos. My dad was a kind of a hoarder, depression child, and
doesn't throw
anything.
Out anything.
Yeah, no, anything that hey, Bill, I got this so yeah, I'll take it.
Yeah.
And then he had a friend who owned a junkyard. Oh, we were in trouble then. We had 2 pool tables, a ping pong table, even though our basement was like way smaller, and it had all kinds of poles and crooked floor, but we still got that pool table in there. You just had, you had a shot, you had to go kind of like this, the stick up in the air sometimes, because the wall was right there, and it was an obstacle course. But we had 2 pianos, and my sister was taking lessons in the school system. 8th grade, you start lessons, So she started lessons, and she was learning, and she would learn the Moonlight Serenade, that rock. Everybody learns to be on a piano. It's like in D flat minor too, I think.
Oh, Moonlight Sonata.
Moonlight Sonata,
yeah,
yes.
Beethoven.
And
yeah,
Beethoven,
yeah.
that's right. So I would play that too. I would just learn everything she learned, but by ear, because I couldn't read music yet. So I was pretty well versed in the piano, especially all the dark keys. I was like Stevie Wonder, because I just knew music by the patterns on the keyboard.
Yeah.
I didn't know any names of the notes, and it was easier to know the patterns on the black keys. So I learned boogie woogie and blues, everything in F sharp. And
Yeah,
D
I always
flat.
wondered that if it was a shape thing for C, because everything is in those really
the
odd,
black keys.
Yeah.
They're easy to feel, you know, and see, and so memorizing the patterns, and then when I took 8th grade, turned 8, it was time to pick your instrument. Of course, I picked the noisiest thing, drums. And then when I turned 9, that's when the orchestral teacher approached me, and she took my hand. She was like, "Oh, look at your hand. That is a hand made for bass players." And I went home like this.
Sounds like you got me too by your music
Mrs.
teacher.
Brown, she said I have a hand for bass player, and so I took up the band. Of course, the 3 guys who were seniors had just graduated. You know, I didn't find that out until years later. Like, oh, she suckered me in. But I'm glad I did. My dad encouraged. He was a musician also, so. It wasn't whether you were going to play an instrument, it was which instrument, because everybody had to play. My sister played the flute, one sister played clarinet, my mother tried to play the piano, although she had absolutely no rhythm, and my dad's saxophone player. So but I always, like, the first thing I learned was improvising, and I'm glad that I did that. So, you know, the first year was spent just doing my own thing, improvising, and I used to keep time for my sisters with 2 pencils on a clarinet case, and that was my first my first drum experience. Then I graduated to, like, you know, I gotta have a cymbal, so that, you know, you get a pot top, ding, there's your cymbal. So I had a whole kit made out of kitchen utensils, and that was my first kit. And then I was like, I like that, so I went to drums. So I played piano, bass, and drums. But growing up in New Jersey, yeah, it's a very like you're talking about, it's a standard, you know, this is very standard way that post World War II musicians play, you know, and you have these standard things. And I didn't really fit in that mold, but nobody needs a vibraphone player in that mold. So
that's a tough place to get
every band needs
gigs.
a bass player. So I worked playing bass, you know,
okay.
from up till like 1987.
Starting, like, when? How old were you when you started gigging?
I started gigging at age 9. They had these community shows in my town, and they're like Broadway plays they did, you know, and these community production companies, Maplewood Players, I think, and the South Orange had. So it's 2 towns that share one school system, South Orange and Maplewood. So they both had their different play groups, all, you know, amateur actors, and they would do a show. So I would do both of those shows, and then my sister also was involved in the Essex County Music School program, and I also did shows there. So I did a lot of these musical shows starting at age 9. I remember my first. Yeah, you're right. Some things I remember really well. That I remember. I got paid a $25 gift certificate and $10 cash.
So you were making more than the average musician today.
That was my first gig. I never forget. I was just so happy. And I think my second paid gig, all the other ones, most of them weren't paid. And my second paying gig, I got paid $15 and a pizza. We played a concert with my rock band. Oof, I would hate to hear tapes of that, because I'm sure it was horrible. But
How was the pizza?
The pizza was pretty good.
Okay.
It was just extra cheese. There was nothing fancy, you know.
Yeah, Bill was saying before we started he has a bad memory, but he keeps pulling up all these gems.
I remember a lot of things. Well, there's a chunk. I was in a car accident with my dad, and I hit the windshield. We were driving an old Chevy Chevelle heavy Chevy, and we were going really slow, but it was freezing. There was like a flash freeze, you know, and it gets cold really quick. And we went through an underpass in like Patterson or somewhere, and there's like a railroad underpass, a tiny little thing, but it's stone, and it gets very cold in there, and the ground had froze, so there was black ice in there. And as you come out of the tunnel, there's a sharp turn.
Yeah.
We came out of the tunnel, went to turn, car didn't turn. Just hit the black ice, kept going at 25 miles an hour. But at 25 miles an hour, 20 miles an hour, you hit a pole without braking at all.
What year? I mean, were there seatbelts at this point?
There were no seatbelts in that 1971 Chevelle, so I went right into the windshield.
And there's no anti-lock brakes, and it's rear-wheel drive, and yeah,
We completely totaled the car, and I sat back in the car. Next thing I remember is the guys asking me, "What state are you in?"
shock.
That was the correct answer. But I said, I got confused.
Yeah.
And I knew I lived in New York, but I knew I was visiting my parents. I think they were taking me to a hospital for an exam. And I said, New York. No. I live in New York. This is New Jersey. Oh, no, he's got a concussion. That was it. I was like, I failed. Yeah. And then I don't remember the ride. Supposedly they drove me to the hospital, checked me out. I was there for like 2 hours. All I remember was back at the house. That's all. That chunk of memory is completely gone.
Yeah, there wasn't as much attention to the way we do now.
Now it's really, they realize the seriousness of head trauma. But then, they told me, don't fall asleep.
Right. Yeah.
And so I was supposed to stay awake until regular sleeping time, that I remember. But I lost a chunk of the 80s.
So how old were you during the accident?
This was like 1992 something, okay. 90, somewhere in there. I know I didn't have a car, so it had to be like 91 or 92. That was the last time I had a car, was 1991. So I guess it was like 92 or 3 or 4.
It's about 30 years ago.
Yeah, no, it must have been 94. 94, I think. So yeah, and I lost a chunk of the 80s. Like, it's just gone. My college years are just gone. All the memories, I don't remember them, any of them. People show me photos, weddings I played at, parties I was at. Don't remember any of it.
Did you get forgiveness on your loans?
I didn't have any loans, fortunately. I was super cheap. I didn't want my parents to spend a lot of money on my college because I knew I wasn't really into college. I just wanted to be a musician. I just wanted to be a jazz musician. So I went to school. I finished my school. School was crazy because I was pretty good at schoolwork.
Where'd you go to school?
Montclair State University.
Okay.
And it was a 5-year program a 6-year program. I finished in 5 years. And the first semester, I took 21 credits. And people are like, oh, college isn't like high school, I want to finish fast. I want to get out of here. So I took 21 credits, then 18 credits, and then like 17 credits. So by the time I got to senior year, I didn't have that much to do.
This was a music program?
Yeah, music program.
Okay.
Yeah. And, you have these courses like band that are rehearsals, these long rehearsals, and they're half a credit.
Yeah.
2 hours for half a credit, 3 hours for half a credit. Band, choir, orchestra. They were all required. So, but and then I met this guy who was roommates with Bruce Willis, an actor, and he taught me how to. How do you? What courses you got to take? We're talking about it, and he's like, "Oh no, man, your philosophy's all wrong. That's not how you go through college." He goes, "Here." He had this booklet, and it had all the teachers and how many papers they make you write. He goes, just pick your classes, pick the guys that give you the least amount of papers to write. And it was genius. All the crappy classes, I just put interior design. No paper there. Okay, I'm going with that. No paper here. Okay, I picked all the ones. This guy, this professor is notorious. If you talk about baseball, he'll get off subject, and that's it. Class is destroyed. I showed up, I think, 5 times out of, like, I don't know, 20 classes. Every time I was there, everybody was like, oh, there's that guy. Did you see a Met game last night? That picture was unbelievable. Oh, that was it. He talked about the Mets the whole rest of the class. Class is over. Every time I was there, I did it. And I ended up getting a C. I failed the test. Didn't do any of the work, but he liked it. He liked that I pretended to be a Met fan, so I got a C. Oh, that is nuts.
You say you lost your whole college memory, and you're still pulling out all the stuff that's better memory than mine.
Well, I guess, yeah. Well, there's a lot of things I don't remember though.
Right.
Like that was kind of earlier, but like the later years and all these parties and gigs I played, don't remember any of them. I remember my senior recital, my freshman recital, because they were, you know, I had Jimmy Owens, and I had a big band it was Jazzmobile Big Band come and play at my senior recital, and I wrote pieces for the big band. And then my freshman recital, no one did a freshman recital at Montclair State. I was like the first person to do a freshman recital. And I wrote this piece that was classical and jazz mixed. And I had this, in high school I had a band, it was like 6 girls and me and another guy. I'm like, she's pretty. You can be in my band. You can be in my band. She's barely play at all, but I'll write you in. And I got this from Duke Ellington. He would write specifically for the people in the band, you know, like, okay, this guy's good at that, and like you know, like a football team, almost like using the talents. So, you know, I did the same thing. Like, oh, this girl could play pretty good. I wrote parts a little more difficult. I wrote the difficulty level for this, but I was barely playing at all. But she looks great. Yeah. So I give her one note. Da 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 da. And we played Freddie Hubbard's First Flight. I think that's called one of those fusion records he did in the 70s. First Flight, I think.
First Flight Skydive?
No, that's Straight Life.
Straight Life. That's it. And I gave him the real simple back parts, and I did all the fancy stuff. That was how. So I continued that in college. This beautiful organist named Pam Sabo. We're still friends on Facebook. So I was like, wow, she's really nice. She was a good friend, you know, so I get her. My girlfriend played French horn at the time. She's a beautiful girl. She's got to be in the band.
So this sounds like you're going for the same titles as Louis Armstrong's Hot 5 and Hot 7, but very, very different hot.
Yeah, I'm not
teenage boy idea. And then I wrote a place for them. They had great timpanist, Ed Metzger. He was really great timpanist. He might have been a senior or something, a junior, I don't remember. So I got him on timpani. You know, I got all the all-stars in there, and then I wrote this piece. And that was it. I was a darling from that moment on, because, you know, there was a whole battle at the time in colleges, right? This was right before the whole collegiate jazz thing exploded. And there were very few jazz programs in colleges. William Patterson had a great one. Montclair State had no jazz program. And a lot of the teachers there who were staunch classical guys, they were bristly about jazz, because I guess, you know, it's unknown to them. So it was, you know, and there was a whole, you know, and they knew their days were numbered, that jazz was kind of moving into the college thing. And if you don't know jazz, you're probably, you know, you're going to be in trouble, because, you know, kids want to play popular music and jazz, you know, they don't want to play classical music anymore. So, I mean, there's always going to be classical music players, but anyways, so there was a little bristling with some of the staunch conservative dudes in me, and
well, I'm not surprised that there's you play in so many genres. I imagine there has to be a lot of like crossover where you're more comfortable mixing things than probably a lot of musicians
some
that
of the other
that
musicians.
you run
Yeah, they just, you know, eventually you begin to learn to not everybody can do everything. You know, it's like some people can only play what they've heard before. They can't invent, something new. They can only play what they've heard. And they could play, that's why they play cover music. They cover other people's music, because to invent out of whole cloth, it's a certain kind of mentality, I think. And so some guys, okay, play Miles Kind of Blue, boom, they'll nail it. Sounds great. It's just like the tradition. But now, just play. Put the music down and just play something. What? Play. Just play. Nothing. Then you got these other guys, avant-garde guys. Play. They got plenty to say, But okay, now play, this Billy Joel
major
song.
Scale.
Yeah, he plays Billy Joel song. Nothing. They got nothing. They're so used to just doing their own thing. They can't really, fit into that. And then some people can do both, or
Yeah, I mean, I have like some particular questions about, I guess, the New York City music scene in that regard, and how well things mixed. But I didn't want to like jump straight away from all the college stuff. I was wondering, like, what from the gigs you had around college and your local community growing up, at what point was like there a break? Like, what gig made you feel like you were kind of like moving up to the next level?
Well, it's funny. I never really thought that I would be a full-time professional musician. I mean, I wanted to be. That was my if there was one wish that I had, people like New Year's resolution, or you make a birthday wish. I only had one wish my entire life. I thought, if I just make this one wish, I think my chances of having it granted are much better than if I have different wishes all the time. So I only had one wish my entire life, was to play music, preferably, if not for a living, at least being able to play a lot, all the time was important. So, but then, you go through college, and then it's like time to support yourself. And I had a day job, which I really liked. I worked for actually, it's kind of a long story, but we have plenty of time. So I'll tell a little part of it. To make a really long story a lot shorter, I got into legal trouble, and I had to have a day job. So fortunately, a girl that I went to school with, who was a roommate of my ex-girlfriend in college, got me a job at the company where she was vice president. And I started out as a driver there. And then I started gigging, and driving during the day and gigging at night is a combination for death. So eventually then I moved to an office, and I was very happy with that, playing gigs at night. And I was doing a lot of salsa music. I started playing bass for a friend of mine, and when I was in college, called me up, said, "Hey, Bill, what do you want? You still have your bass? You still playing?" I said, "Yeah, I'm still gigging on bass." And he said, "Do you think you could play salsa if it was all written out and I gave you a bunch of records?" I gave it a shot, And I had just met a guy in New York when I was playing. I got, you said college loans. I didn't have loans because a lot of my money I made in college was playing music on the street. Mm-hmm. And we would make like, $100 a day when we play on the street. And that got me through school. But I met a guy who I started arranging for he said, "Oh, you got a great feel for Latin music," because I would play a few Joe Beam tunes, And he said, "Oh, you got such a good feel for Latin music." And so I learned the basis of Cuban music. He gave me a bunch of records, and I learned charanga and son and I started writing. So I had already had that, and then this other thing, and this friend called me out of the blue, Mike Kaplan, a saxophone player from Jersey. he called me up out of the blue and asked me to join this salsa band. So I started playing. I played with that band for years. I'm still associated with the leader of that band. We're producing some stuff now. So I was playing the salsa gigs, a lot of salsa gigs and Cuban gigs, and I met this great Marielito, who was the director of the Cuban National Ballet when he was living in Cuba, and then he came over in the Marielitos, and he was living in the States, and he had started a school, and he was teaching Cuban music, so I was learning from him, and I was very happy in that scene. And then you asked me what gig. I get a call. I played at the wedding of guitarist Mark Rebo. You know Mark Rebo?
Sure.
His brother Greg and I were good friends, and I played. He had a little company where they did a lot of club dates, and he was really getting involved in Argentinian music. He had an Argentinian guitar player he was playing a lot with, and he was doing records with that, and cumbia, traditional cumbia from Colombia and then Venezuela. And he also did a lot of club dates. He had jazz and classical music. So I was playing with him. He got married. I played at his wedding. And his brother Mark was there, who I had always wanted to meet. I heard great things about him. You know, he was touring with Elvis Costello at the time. And he heard me play, and speaking of Moment's Notice, that's the tune he said in Moment's Notice. I remember that. See, this is really pivotal moments I remember because I've told him so many times. Yeah. So then it sticks in your memory. But that was a turning point because he heard me play, and he was in a band called the Jazz Passengers, which at the time it was called Attention Shoppers. And they were, him, Roy Nathanson, Curtis Folks, E.J. Rodriguez were all part of a band called the Lounge Lizards, John Lurie, and the Lounge Lizards. And as many bands form, many of the members in that band were frustrated with John. And so they started their own little spin-off band called Attention Shoppers. And I get a call, Mark, from the band leader, Roy Nathanson. He says, "Hey, Mark Rebo told me that, that you were, a great player, and see if you would be interested in playing in this band." I was like, Attention Shoppers, wow, that's I don't know what that's all about, but I was basically, I was really a straight ahead player. That's where my focus was, and just straight ahead jazz mostly, and some fusion with Latin music, of course. And I always liked sort of jazz fusion like Chick Corea, Return to Forever, John McLaughlin, Mahavishnu, Weather Report. Who else? Chuck Mangione was hot then. Freddie Hubbard was just doing some crossover stuff, with Fender Rhodes and electric bass, and Herbie Hancock, Headhunters. And I was interested in that stuff too, but I really wasn't on that level to play that music yet. But that's all I knew. I didn't know Ornette Coleman, and that music sounded crazy to me. Like, that's too out. I don't understand that music. Or, late John Coltrane, Ascension, and all that. That's like over my head. So I remember the first rehearsal, we're going to get together at a rehearsal. I was like, okay, can you send me the charts, so I can look at the music? It's like, well, we'll get it together. Don't worry about that. It's like, all right. I don't know how this is going to go, because I was really terrible sight reader then. So I was kind of worried, like, oh boy, they put some stuff in front of me. And I didn't know many tunes because I've been mostly playing Latin gigs. So I knew all, like, Latin standards I knew, but I didn't know that many jazz standards, 15, 20 tunes. So I got to the first rehearsal, and they're like, there's no chart. Like, oh, just do this thing. What? So he starts. I was like, well, these guys are nuts. What kind of music is this? Nobody's gonna come see this. I thought this is the gig. Oh wow, I'm gonna be playing in New York. I'm finally, playing vibes. And because I think it was like really the first Vibraphone gig call that I had gotten. I was all bass. Up until then I played bass. I did some gigs. Then didn't use me around town that much because I didn't know that many standards. So but the Latin thing I could do, it's all written. So that stuff I did. And that was but I remember we played a gig in New York, and I was learning on the job because I had never heard this music before. So just gave me some records, and I listened to it, but my straight ahead training, I mean, all those early avant-garde guys, Eric Dolphy, all those guys, they were coming out of straight ahead, so they had the background, they had the training, the chops, the understanding, the theory, they had all that, and they just took it to another level. But a lot of the next level avant-garde guys were just trying to start there and go, and so it was, there was a lot of junk, but this band was really, that was really cool. So the first gig we did, I think we played at The Kitchen. This place in New York? Oh. The Kitchen. I don't even know if it's still there, but it was a funky little, tiny little place, but it was packed. I was surprised. And then the Knitting Factory opened up in '89, I guess. We did a tour through Canada in 1987 with that band. And there was an audience for this music. I couldn't believe it. I was like, the audience for straight ahead jazz was shrinking. So I assumed that, this kind of music, this is even less popular than that. So, but there was a real audience for it, and we did a successful tour through Canada, and I started to sort of understand the music, and had my influence on the band. Because I was, for a change of pace, I was the more conservative guy in the group. So that I think it was good. It was a good marriage of guys who were really coming out of a real avant-garde tradition, and other guys that were coming out of a more straight-ahead tradition.
And then you would go on to make it. And then you would go on to make an album with Mark doing the music of Duke Ellington.
Yes,
which ties in you wanting to write. That was all
through the Knitting Factory. Yeah, actually, the record that I did with Mark was not. That was a Japanese label.
Okay.
And an engineer for Groove Collector, Hiro, was responsible for that. He had this record company that wanted to do something with me. Like a duo, which is all they could afford. And so they were like, and they were very happy when I had Mark Rebel, because he was somebody that was well known. And so I did a duo, and it was a very limited release in Japan, and they gave me the master, and they said that I could relicense it wherever I wanted. But not in Japan. So then I ended up re-releasing the record on Knitting Factory label, and then of course they kind of screwed it up, and it ended up going to Japan anyways, which made a real rift between me and the label. But that's a whole.
It probably would have done a lot better in Japan than any other place.
That's a whole nother story. But yeah, funny. Japan played a significant role too, because. So that was a pivotal gig for me, because that got me into the Jazz Passengers, and because of that, we were rehearsing, of course, in the city, and everything was in the city, and I was in the city all the time. And then I got a buddy of mine who I met through the Latin scene, Jay Rodriguez, band leader. This will go back in history to 82 maybe, 1, 2, 3. Calls me up and he says, and we had this local gig. It was a mile from my house in Irvington, New Jersey. His uncle owned this place, and we played there every Thursday night.
Oh, nice.
So he calls me up. Oh, Bill, it's Butch. Hey, Butch, what's going on, man? there's this kid that wants to sit in with us. Can you go pick him up? Oh, really? Where does he live? He lives in like North Bergen. So I'm like, oh man, that's like 45 minutes. So I had to drive all the way, 45 minutes, pick him up and drive all the way back to the gig and then drop him home and drive back. But I did, and I'm glad I did, because Jay's, he ended up being a terrific music partner for many years. And he was responsible for the 8 Ball Records deal, Jay. And he's also responsible for moving me to New York. He found a place for me to live and lost it, and then found another place. But that's a whole nother story. But I eventually moved to New York, one of those illegal lofts on 6th Avenue between 28th and 29th Street. And had this loft. It was like $500 a month. No, it was $1,000 a month, and 1,200 square feet.
Yeah,
nice spot. Back in 1990, that was a nice spot.
That was on the way out for those kinds of scenes too.
Yes, exactly. That scene was on its way down. But cool landlord. He was very cool, and the cool thing was I was the only resident in the building. It was all businesses on the other 3 floors. It was a 4th floor walk up. And so that was cool. So after 6:30, the entire building was mine. You could make as much noise as you want there, which was fantastic.
Just out of curiosity, in that era, we're going to interview Verna Gillis shortly on this, and she was a big part. She had a record company called Soundscape. I don't know if I'm just curious if you've ever crossed paths, because she was in the 60s and the 70s and 80s. She was big on that loft scene, and I'm just curious if you crossed paths with her.
I heard the name. I've heard of her, but never didn't cross paths.
A lot of stuff with Roswell Rudd. I don't know but it's that same area. So I was just curious.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of weird that way too. I was never really a people person, and I don't like to hang out. It's like Donald Fagen is also like, he's like, oh, so this is hanging out, huh? What do I do? I was like, that epitomizes me. I knew a reason why I love this guy. He's just like me. It epitomizes me. It's like, oh, this is hanging out, huh? So what do we do? Like I had a beer, I had some food. Now what do I do? We just talk? How do you do this? There always had to be a purpose for me. Like, oh, they're gonna have some great weed there. Oh, okay, I'll go. Oh, this girl's gonna be there. That you're like, oh, okay, I'll go there. Yeah, this musician's gonna be there. You gotta meet him. Okay. Then you could drag me out of my house, but other than that, don't bother me.
That's a perfect place to transition. Want to talk about that album that you did with Donald? The Alive.
Yeah, well, that was a whole experience.
Well, you toured with them as the percussionist, not just on Vibraphone, from 1993 to 95, correct?
93 to 95, yep.
So how did you get to working with them, and then how did the album come together?
Well, the whole thing, that's my life. Like, I never looked for any of it. I had my day job, I had my little gigs, I practiced, and I was very happy and all of that until, I got plucked out of the air, like, oh, these guys like you, play with them, okay. Played with, Jazz Passengers first. In 87, I started playing with them, and then Jay called me up, oh, you got to move to the city, I'm playing with this really great band, you got to check the scene out. I moved to the city, and Jay introduced me to it's funny, I was in New York for 1 month in 1990. I get a call from Jay, oh, this girl is looking for musicians to go to Japan, you interested? Yeah. And the Jazz Passengers had about 4 months where we weren't doing anything, and I had just moved to the city, and I had my rent when I was in New Jersey was like $536, and now my rent is $1,000. So, the company that my day job, the company went out of business. So I was like, whoa, hey, where's the money coming from now? And so I was looking for I'm looking for more stuff to happen. So Jay, he calls me up. Oh yeah, tells me about this. So we went to Japan. Make a long story short, they had agents in New York and they put together this band to make. They were trying to sell jazz, because at that point, jazz, really quality New York style jazz, would cost you $350 to $500 a ticket in Japan to go to see a concert. And it's like, a concert like Miles or somebody like that, and it's expensive as, like the average person can't afford it. So they wanted to come up with an idea of having like a supper club jazz thing where people would pay like $50 to $75 for a dinner and jazz. So they got like lesser known jazz people, and that was the concept. They wanted to have us for 2 years. They couldn't get anybody. No quality jazz musician wants to go to Yokohama, Japan for 2 years. It's like, no. So 1 year, no. 6 months, no. We got it down to 3 months. So we went. Greg Murphy, Greg, great jazz piano player, and Andy McLeod, great jazz bass player. He just passed away, I think 2-3 years ago. He played with like Elvin Jones, big band for years. Great bass player. He was part of it. So we went over to Japan. We played 6 nights a week, 3 sets a night for 3 months. When I came back to New York, that gig kind of made my chops, because you just don't have gigs like that anywhere, except for like in Asia. They have, most of them are R&B gigs. They have an R&B band. They bring an R&B band over from the South for like 6 months, 2 years, like a year, whatever. Long gigs, these house band, So that was unheard of. So that, but and we didn't just schlock through it like a club date or something. We really kind of took it seriously, and they wanted us to rehearse 5 days a week. Like,
they wanted you to rehearse?
We're playing jazz standards. It's not, just they have a different mentality. Yeah. It's just like very work and like, and so we negotiated that down to 3 days a week, I think it was. We rehearsed 3 days a week. So what are we going to rehearse? So what I did was I would make like arrangements I would make new arrangements, and then we would incorporate like Japanese melodies into, how can we fit these Japanese melodies into, so we have these elaborate these intros, and we would work in, like, every city in Japan has a melody.
Oh wow.
And when you cross the street for the blind, the melody plays when the light is green.
Huh.
So each town has, so the town we were in, Yokohama, had a da da dee ba da ba da da dee ba da ba da. It's from some traditional Japanese music. So I learned some traditional Japanese music. So we do like Stella by Starlight. We start out with like a pedal tone in the bass, boom, 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 the boom, ding, dong, 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 da dee da ba da ba da, boom, boom, dee da ba da, boom, boom, da 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 dee da ba da ba da, boom, boom, da dee da ba da, boom, da dee da. Da da, and just incorporate. And so every day, we figure out little things, and just to keep it interesting. And then we play like Cherokee. We start out da 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 da. By the time we left there, da 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 dee da da. We just bump up the tempo every night. We bump it up. Then we start. Okay, each soloist will go up a half step, so that we learn this in all 12 keys. I just come up with musical challenging things every week to keep it fresh, and it made the gig interesting and raised the level of everybody's playing. By the time we got out of there, where everybody was burning at 300 beats a minute, we were all part of the 300 club. 300, beats a minute, easy. Like, and also taught me, if you want to play bebop, the only way to play bebop is to play bebop every day. All day. You got to play those tempos, because your chops are like on fire by then, and just like regular music is too like easy. It's like Mary Had a Little Lamb. Let's play it faster or something. It's like, it's too easy. And so that so then I came back to New York 3 months later, and I was so happy about that. I was like, I got to find a gig like that around here. It's the only way I'm going to become the player that I want to be. So I started looking for stuff, and the piano player approached me, who had a steady supper gig in this place called Metropolis Cafe. So he basically didn't have a band. He was from Australia and he didn't have a band. I had a band. So my piano player was very busy. Matt King, great piano player from Jersey, keyboardist. And he was very busy. He was getting more busy. And so I was like, okay, I'll bring my band minus a piano player, and this piano player got the gig. So I just incorporated my band. So we're playing upstairs. Downstairs, they had a floating club called Giant Step. I don't know if you remember Giant Step from the 90s. Acid jazz. The acid jazz scene was just starting. Giant Step was sort of kicking that whole thing off. And they had DJs, really hip DJs, and live musicians playing along with the DJs. And so they invited people to sit in, and it blew up. They had 800 people down there and a line out the door. And that particular area also, there's a cafe there was a cafe right on the corner, a lot of photography studios around there. So a lot of models hung out in that area. So it was kind of, had that vibe to that, models seem to, bring.
I'm sensing a theme with you.
Yeah. Well, I'm not a model kind of guy. I found that out really quick. You got that's like money people, I was never a money guy, and so that scene, that was not for me. But I saw all those people, and it's funny. Cal Jader has a similar story of why he started doing Latin jazz, because he had a jazz group, whole thing, and he saw the Latin people going into the thing downstairs, and like they got 5,000-6,000 people going in there, and I got 20, so I want to play that. Yeah. So slowly but surely, my group, I have Fabio Magera on trumpet, Jay Rodriguez on tenor saxophone, Josh Roseman on trombone.
Oh, I know Josh.
Barney McCall on piano. He plays with Gary Bartz. Brad Jones was playing bass, and they were all going downstairs to the club to sit in, where there were 800 people and unbelievable women, celebrities came through there, all kinds of people to sit in, and it was a big scene. So eventually they formed the group Groove Collective. That's how Groove Collective formed, which was another one of these. There was a band called Repercussions, and a lot of the members were very unhappy with the band leader there, so they formed their own little jam thing, because that was a very tightly arranged pop thing, and they wanted to play, so they formed their own thing. And what interested me was they were playing for dancers. It was like jazz, quality music, funky beats, but quality music on top. But for dancing, and I was like, this could sell. This could work. And I always love playing for dancers. Just a certain energy you're really getting, and not just people watching. They're actually participating in it. The energy of that always interested me. So I started playing with them. Repercussions and Groove Collective became a packaged record deal that, through the producer, the keyboard player for Repercussions, Scott Barkham. There we go. Come on, brain cells, don't fail me now. Scott Barkham was the manager of River Sound.
Okay.
Donald Fagen's recording studio. He was the keyboard player for Repercussions. He got Gary Katz to come check out his band, and also he checked out Groove Collective. So he got a package deal selling this new style acid jazz music to Warner Brothers. Unfortunately, Warner Brothers was just in the midst of a big changeover. Lenny Waronker, I think, was the CEO, and he got the oust, and all his people got booted, and they brought in a whole new crew. And of course, we were Lenny's people, so we kind of got shelved in that whole deal. But the good thing was, Gary Katz produced the Steely Dan records, so he's the one that recommended me to Donald Fagen. And Donald heard my Clubbird All Stars when we came back from Japan. I changed the band up a little bit, and we did a recording on the Knitting Factory. It was really, the critics was raving about it, and so that's the record he heard, and maybe he heard my Keeping Up with the Joneses record. No, that was later. Yeah, that was the record that he heard, and he hired me sight unseen.
Wow.
Just like kind of unusual for them, but they believe, Gary Katz. If he was like, if I could have one influence on this new rendition of Steely Dan, it's that was it. That was me. So he said, because he wasn't crazy about the guitarist that they had, the lead guitarist. I don't know why. I think he's an unbelievable player. Drew Zing, unbelievable worker too. That work ethic of that guy is. I mean,
that's the. Yeah, he's on that album. That dude's amazing.
Just ridiculous. Drew is like, and he's a guy that he had a little practice rig. It was about this big. He could plug his. Funny, he had like a little multi-track thing. That guy he's like the Cuban musicians. He's like the guitar is like attached to his body. Like that guy practiced. I was like, damn, vibraphone players can't do that. It makes me so jealous. You can walk around with your instrument and like never put it down. I mean, if I did that, it'd be very awkward. But Drew was like, but Gary supposedly didn't like. Wasn't crazy about it. He's like, if I have to listen to his solos all night, I'm not going to even come to the concert. But why don't you hire this guy? Because you could have some other kinds of solos besides tenor saxophone and guitar, and he's a great soloist, and he also plays percussion. Because they were like, what do we do? He can't have vibes on every tune, But he plays percussion also, so they got a percussion rig for me, and I ended up doing the gig.
Yeah. Do you remember like your first time meeting Donald? Was that like in a rehearsal?
Yeah, we rehearsed, and this was my first. I call them A level. It's like you got your A level bands that travel plane and they stay in 5-star hotels. Then you got your B level bands that travel planes, but mostly trains, and they stay in 3-star hotels, and then you got your like C-level guys who are traveling in their car, and I haven't done that much of the C-level, most of them B-level, but this was like my first real like A-level tour. Although I did do one gig A-level. My very first gig out of the country was supporting Chocolate Armentero. I don't know if you heard of this guy.
No.
One of the most. He was like people describe him as the Louis Armstrong of Cuba.
Oh wow!
Unbelievable talent, and such a sweet guy, wonderful guy. And I'm like, this is nuts. I played in a bullfighting stadium in 1986, and the band was called Típico Septeto Cubano. Except there were like 2 Cubans in it. I thought, this is ridiculous. This is like my first big gig in 120,000 people.
Wow.
And we're the lead act on 20 bands. We were the main headliner out of 20 bands in this festival. And I felt like such a phony. I'm like, I just learned this music, and here I am like at the pinnacle. And like, it was crazy. But that was my first. But other than that, this was my first. And that was, that was kind of A-level. Beautiful hotel right on the beach in Cartagena, at the topless beach. I have never seen a sea of 12s.
So this was more
half
of a
naked.
This was more of a C or a double D tour, is what you're saying?
Whoa! Yeah, exactly. It's an A double D tour, and cocaine grows on trees there, and
it actually does.
It really, literally grows on trees there. And we would buy the leaves. You could buy the leaves for like $2, and best high ever. Chocolate latte, we all chipped in $40 and got like a small mountain of cocaine. And I was like, unbelievable. It was like the greatest time, one of the greatest times that I ever had in my life. I slept.
This is in South America.
Yeah, 5 days I was there. I slept 9 hours. I'll sleep next year. This is too. And that's a whole nother story. But anyways, that was that. So I get. Yeah. So this was the first A level, and just, you know, the staying in the 5-star hotels, and the first rehearsal was at, you know, catered rehearsal, my first catered rehearsal at SIR, you know. So everybody's a little nervous, you know, like, because they have such a reputation, right, for
Perfection.
like, perfection, and like, I was always in bands where it's like, you know, people on my own level and my boys, friends, whatever, you know, people that becomes like more like a family, you know. Jazz Passengers, we're still together. We're getting ready to do another, and maybe our last record, because the guys are getting old. Next 2 weeks from now, we're going to record another record, and the band leader's son is going to sing and play with us for the first time. Yeah, I had never been like I didn't do that much sideman work, where, you know, top level sideman work. So I was sort of like a rookie there in terms of that, you know. Peter Erskine, Cornelius Bumpus, Bob Shepard, Chris Potter, Warren Bernhardt, Drew Zing. I mean, these guys are all like top level studio guys. So I'm like, what the hell am I doing here?
It's a great place to find yourself in.
Exactly. Yeah. It was nuts. So, but anyway, so we do in the first rehearsal, and it was what was that tune? Da, da, da.
Oh yeah,
Home at Last.
Home at Last. Yeah.
Ba, ba, ba. Da, 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 da. Was it Home at Last, or was it No, it was Cold, Daring, No Flies
Green
on
Earrings?
Me, Green Earrings.
Yeah.
Right. So Donald sits down. He had a rehearsal with the rhythm section already. So they had done a week. So they were tight. But it was the first rehearsal with all the piano, with me, the singers, and the horn section. So Donald comes in, everybody's stewing around, you know, talking, meeting, and whatever. Which in those days I was really bad. I was super shy, so I just doing my thing, like, wow, Peter Erskine. Like, I'm trying not to be, you know, blown away by all this, and I was, you know, younger too, and kind of cocky in my own way, I guess, you know, like, there ain't no star, I'm the real star here. So Donald comes in, everybody's, ooh, okay. He sits down. Okay, we're gonna start with Green Earrings. Everybody gets their music out. Right? So he says, okay, the one thing I went all over this with the rhythm section, and he went over sort of some of his philosophies about, and it was a great learning experience in terms of band. He's a great band leader. I mean, he knows what he wants and he knows how to get it. So he explained this whole thing, like, it's really important to make the off of notes. This is one of the greatest things I learned, is it's not funky enough to get the on right, but you got to get the off. Huh. And I never thought about the off of notes.
Like, yeah, releasing together so everyone has the
so
same
that it breathes.
length. Yeah.
You know, so he was like, and when there are certain beats I don't want you to play on, like, it makes it the spaces that I want. So he said, make sure if you come off the notes crisp, da da da, off, da da da, da da da, off, da. You know, and every tune has the little where you need space to make the grooves happen, and that was a real, you know, mental note taker right there for me. It's like, man, the offs, and I never thought of that. So there were a lot of learning experiences like that. So he says, well, in this tune, I don't want anybody on the one but the bass and the kick. So it's boom, sha ba ba, da ba ka ba ba, off, da da da, sha ka da da, off, ba ba ba. So we're like, and I was really into the James Brown method, because I had watched a bunch of videos of how he puts tunes together. You know, he like sings all the parts. He knows all the parts. He plays all the parts, and he plays all the parts, and he sings. If he can't play the instrument, he'll sing them to you, and that's the, you know, he just invents it, like. And so I was really into this counter, like, because it's all boom boom shika boom boom shika boom 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 shika, you know, interlocking parts. And I was like, really, Donald? Do you really? So first thing I did, he said, so make sure don't put anything on the one. Okay, he counts it off. 1, 2. Go. Peter Erskine always counted off because he had, they were really strict about tempos. So he had a machine that would start the tune with a click and then cut out after whatever he programmed, 16 bars, 18 one. So he would count, okay, tick, tick, tick. And of course, being that jerk that I am, what do? The first thing he said, don't do this, I did it. I go, bling, boom, oh, we got through the tune. We got through about 32 bars. And he goes, oh, whoa, stop. Bill, don't put anything on the one. Mike's like, did you hear me, you fucking idiot? I'm sure that's what he's really thinking of it. Bill, he's a very subtle guy, very soft, you know, few words, and don't put anything on the one. I was like, all right, I thought that part sounded pretty cool, but all right, if that's what you want. Same thing, we get about 32 bars. Hold on. Bill, go back to doing what you were doing. Oh, you were right. That sounded better. He never said another word to me the entire time. It's like, don't tell me what to play.
Well, yeah, that's
you can tell him other dudes what to play. Don't tell me what to play. I know what to play. I had a bad attitude, but that was my experience with Steely Dan. That first rehearsal, that kind of like that was it, and then. I don't think Donald hardly said 2 words to me other than that, and I wish I had my personality now and confidence now that back then, 30 years back, because I would have probably made more of an attempt to learn some things from him. But I did watch, he has a video out about how he did talk to me several times about how he puts stuff together, you know, which is really interesting. You know, he starts, every tune he writes he starts out with like a blues concept. Every single tune. You know, like, Asia? How did that, I don't hear any blues in that. Yeah. But every tune starts out, it's like, where's the 4-chord movement? You know, like, I don't, you know, where's that? And I'm going to find that blues in here. And then he has the melody, you know, where they work the words together, and then he'll go, okay, here's what, you know, here's one way to harmonize it, or the standard way, or whatever you want to call it. And that chord there, let me try this one.
That's what's cool about that album.
Let me try this one. Let me try that. And every chord, like, he'll go through it to try and find the, you know, the perfect chord that's not your typical thing for that, and that leads you. So that whole method was pretty cool to learn, and he has a whole video out on how he does that. So that I learned from them. But that was kind of like, that set the tone. I had a little battle like going on with some of the guys because I was inventing my own parts. I either doubled Donald or I invented my own parts. They're like, oh, he's making up stuff that's not on the chart, man. They're trying to get me fired. And that came to head, I remember the Madison Square Garden show. Drew came up to me, the musical director, and he was like, oh, some of the guys in the band are complaining about you, so I have to talk to Donald and Walter. And I was like, wow. Am I going to get fired?
But that was a 2-year tour?
It won't be the first time, motherfuckers. I've been fired. Well, you know, at my job, that one corporate job that I had, I worked myself up to, I was the manager of the account receivables department. And the chairman, we had a meeting one day, and the chairman was coming. Oh, John Froling, the chairman is coming in. Oh, everybody was, you know, oh, the chairman, you know. Like, yeah, I didn't really give a shit because I knew I was going to be leaving that job to play music anyways, eventually. So that was my mentality. So we had this big meeting, and he was like, "Oh, you know, you're not collecting the bills fast enough." I was busting my ass for that job. So, dude, don't talk to me like that. I don't care who chairman or who you are. Everybody's like, and then he was like, "Well, who do you think you are? You can't talk to me like that." I stood up. I threw a chair across the room. And I gave him, dropped the F-bomb. I'm like, boom, just like that.
Fagan.
No, this was the chairman of the company that I was in. I don't take shit from people like you. You know, bam, he fired me. The president of the company called me up the next day, hired me back, and they doubled my salary. You got balls, man. I can't believe you did that.
I'm going to try that at my next gig.
I know. I was like, wow. You ever see that Walter Mitty, like, the How to Succeed in Business?
No, I've heard of that. I don't know what that is really.
That's kind of the story of that. It's like, you know, you got to know when to, when to hold them and when to fold. Sometimes, sometimes you just got to say no, and then they turn around and have respect for you. And I was like, it doesn't work. But it worked. I couldn't believe it. They called me up. And I really needed that job, too, because like I told you, I had these legal problems. And if it went south, I was going to need that to get out of prison and go to work release, which I ended up doing. I went to jail for a year, and I was out on work release, and I recorded a record with Jazz Passenger. I think our first album I recorded, I was in jail. And I was sneaking out I was supposed to be at my job, but they allowed me to sneak into New York. And I almost got caught. They came to check, actually, one time, and my boss totally covered for me. Oh, he's out on a run. He'll be back.
This is like the supervised release part.
Yeah. So the guy showed up. You know, they'll go every once in a while and check on you, you know. Yeah. And he showed up, and I was in New York. And they were like, oh, he's on a run. He'll probably be back in an hour if you want to wait.
He's not on the run.
Yeah.
They don't mess around.
Oh, it was crazy.
Yeah.
But I managed to. I was in jail for a year. I did 3 months of that. 6 months of that. Yeah. 3 months and 2 weeks, I think it was. Yeah, that's right. You do 2/3. You get time off for good behavior, half the time off for good behavior, another third of the time off for for having a job and maintaining a job.
So as far as your tours are concerned, this is the D level?
Yeah, this was the, I think this is the F level. There might even be below F, like the Z level.
No food reviews coming from you?
Well, actually, federal prison is probably Z level. I was more like, county jail is like, it's like G level, I guess.
I bet it's tough recording when you're in prison. You probably get behind a few bars.
Actually, there were no bars because I was I graduated out of the jail. The first couple of weeks you're in jail, like they put you in the main house with like murderers and stuff, while you're waiting for your work release papers to come through. That was probably one of the scariest.
If you're in county, they don't divide you up. You're all together.
Yeah. Well, at first.
Because they're waiting to send you.
Right. They're waiting to send you wherever you're going to go. Yeah. But at first, you're all together. And so, all those people that are waiting their trial or whatever, they're all there. And it was like 30 guys in a room about the size of, smaller than this entire basement. 30 guys. Bathroom with like 5 urinals and 1 toilet on a stage with no curtain. That I'll never forget. Yeah. Walking in that bathroom, like looking at the toilet up on a stage, and the bathroom has no. It's like there are 2 doors into this bathroom area. It's sort of like it's like this, like a wide open room, and there are 2 doors here with no doors on them, just doorways, just open. Yeah. And there's the toilet, like over there, on a stage. I'm like, are you kidding me? I didn't poop for a week. No, almost 2 weeks.
Oh, my God.
Almost 2 weeks, bro. I did not poop. Ugh. I'm not sitting on a stage in front of everybody. I just couldn't. Nowadays, I'd be like, fuck it, I don't care. But at 20-something, I was like, that is not happening. That has not happened. Yeah. And then, like, my uncle was the assistant commissioner of the labor department in New Jersey, so I had I had a good connect there, and he supposedly made a few calls like to sort of speed up my work release. But and then in the meantime, I got a job, the best prison job, the second best prison job. The best prison job is the laundry because he gets to go all over, including the women's part of the prison. And the second best is commissary. That's you work in the prison store.
Yep.
So I got the commissary job, and so there's one guy who's like, it's just like it is on TV. There's one guy who's like, obviously the biggest, strongest, baddest guy in there, and he had killed somebody. He had 2 bodies on him. He had some armed robbery, killed 2 guys. So he got 2 bodies on him, and this guy was built like, he was built like The Rock. He looked a lot like The Rock too. That same light skin, big guy. So I get the prison job, and there were all kinds of knuckleheads in there bothering me, and just because I was a shy guy, quiet, very thin. I weighed 106, barely 160 pounds, 157 pounds. So I was pretty scrawny, and they were bothering me. So then I get the prison job. Now all of a sudden, like, nobody's bothering me anymore, but the big guy calls me over. I'm like, oh man, can this get any worse? So he shoos one of his boys away. He has like, and there's like prison. It looks like it's still in the 1950s. I mean,
yeah, they're old.
I mean, they don't. That prison actually is closed now. The one this was in New Jersey, and so. Anyways, just like he's sitting on an old broken down chair. It's the only chair in there. The rest is like some milk cartons and some other, like boxes, and that's what people are sitting on. So he shoos his boy. Get make way for this guy. Yeah, sit down next to me. So I'm like, oh boy. So I sit down. He goes, oh, I hear you got the commission job. And I said, yeah. He says, they give you 2 cartons of cigarettes a week, don't they? I said, yeah. You want them? You can have them. I don't smoke. That's how stupid I was. He was like, is this guy for real? Like, nobody's that stupid. Like, I'm like, oh, you want them? You can have them. Okay. He's like, he was expecting, I guess I don't know, he was expecting a fight from me. I'm like 457-pound musician. You're a fucking professional killer. What do you expect? Sure, you can have them. What else you want? You want my shoes? I mean, I was really like this, and he was so taken back by it, and by like sort of like my, all the guys there, they're all like, ghetto dudes, like they didn't even think a lot of people were asking me, what country are you from? Because my English was so, my dad was an English teacher, so my diction and English, speaking properly if you made a grammatical mistake, you might lose dessert. My family, so I was very proper. And, hey man, where you from? England? So I play it. Yes, I was born in Hampshire. Yes. I just make some shit up, and wow, it's so easy to like bamboozle all those guys. They're so dumb. So but it was so funny. Like, so I gave him the cigarettes. After that, nobody bothered me. I was like, this is awesome. Yeah, that's great. And I was like the only guy in prison with a decent job. So after and you have to take your paycheck from your job and directly deposit it into the prison bank. So you're not allowed to have any money.
Of course.
So
except your 2 cartons of cigarettes.
After the first month, I was the richest guy in prison, and everybody because there's no secrets in there, because the prisoners kind of run everything. So like the records, like they're the secretary. So everybody knew that I had the most money in my prison account by thousands. So I don't know what that guy's doing. So after a while, they thought I was like some king queen drug dealer or something. So I got treated with a lot of respect. I was getting my suits pressed for me and my sandwiches made for me at night by his Uncle Corey. It's like the oldest guy in prison.
You were getting the aged toilet wine.
You know, but I was out every day, so you know.
Yeah.
Once I got my work release papers, thank goodness I was out, because it was getting, you know, weird in there with the 30 people in the room, and finally I could go to the bathroom. Whew, man, I was so relieved to get my work release job. But that was the late '80s for me. So then, yeah, to go from that to Steely Dan in 4 years was those from '88. I got out of prison in '88, and then I moved to the city in '90. Then I Steely Dan in '93. Then I had a tragedy. Then I had fell '94. The tour ended. I went to a party. I think Josh Roseman was with me, and we got out of a cab. I drank vodka. I was a little depressed because the Steely Dan tour had ended, and I drank vodka, which I'm not supposed to drink, and I turn into Dr. Jekyll with when I drink. I turn into Mr. Hyde when I drink vodka. So I don't even remember it. I attacked some girl or something, and I fell and I broke a bone in my foot. I didn't realize it. I walked on it for 4 days. Then I went into the hospital, and I told them I think I broke my foot. It was all swollen and sore. They were like, if you broke your foot, you wouldn't be able to walk on it. I told them the whole story, and they were like, no, there's no way it's broken. Maybe you have a bad sprain or something. Sure enough, it was broken. And the reason why I didn't feel it was when they took the cast off my leg, all the muscles from my knee down were completely gone. Like complete atrophy, 100% atrophy. And they were like, oh my God, something is up with your nervous system. You have to go to a neurologist. So they sent me to an orthopedic specialist first to see if there's anything wrong with my knee, nothing wrong with the leg. Sent me to a neurologist, did an MRI. Sure enough, they found a 2 millimeter sized tumor in my spinal column, in the spinal cord, crushing the spinal cord. It damaged my spinal cord, and so then they removed the tumor, but I could no longer stand and play the vibraphone. I can't stand that. I couldn't, for years, I couldn't stand at all. And I could barely walk. So I started riding a bicycle everywhere through the entire 90s. Everywhere I went, I took a bike on the subway. It was a wheelchair, basically. So I was basically a wheelchair. I could get from point A to point B, but only by like holding onto things. And they didn't want me to use a cane because it's a very rare situation, but it's a regenerative nerve condition. So the nerves are getting better. It's just really slow. So up until when Dana first met me in 2010, I couldn't walk to the train station most days. Especially if I was a little tired, I couldn't walk to the train station. I couldn't stand at all. Like standing, like just standing, I couldn't stand at all.
Oh my God.
I had to lean on somebody. So everywhere I went, you know, hey, I just lean on them.
Listening to a lot of Bill Withers.
Yeah, I was Bill Withers. But I would lean, you know, and then eventually I stopped going out a lot because you feel so uncomfortable. Like in a crowded bar situation, I could not maneuver. My feet, you know, it's like one leg is 30% and the other one's like 85. So and then you start going out less and you're just doing less things, and I couldn't dance anymore. I couldn't. So, but I changed my playing in kind of a good way, because after that I started sitting, and then once I sat, I realized now I have a free foot, and it's better for your back, and I have a free foot. So I started using effects pedals, and I really took advantage of my pickup system. I started playing eventually, because I was playing with so many loud bands. Groove Collective especially is a really loud band. And I had a pickup system, and I would play through an amp. And then I just told the story to I did a radio interview for this guy out in California, And I was telling him that it led to me having the effects pedal, and then I did a gig with John Zorn. He asked me about John Zorn, and I said, well, John Zorn is kind of responsible for me, doing some electric guitar things, because I played with this, I think, Death God, or I forget the name, Pig God, or it's like he had this band with this drummer who was one of the loudest drummers I've ever heard.
John Zorn did, or
John Zorn.
Was it Naked City? Or?
No, it wasn't Naked City. It was God Dog, something like this. It wasn't. It was a trio. It was like a power trio, and they played like this death metal kind of shit, but with saxophone, drums, and bass, maybe something like that.
Okay, all I really know of John Zorn is Naked City. It's that like metal-ish,
he had a
jazz
lot
kind of
different
vibe, but I know,
but it's like sort of jazz, sort of with metal, like it was loud. It was insanely loud. So, he wants you to sit in with him. It'll be funny, like vibes with this like ridiculously loud band. So, I had this. Usually, I used to use a JC 120 because it's super clean. Guitarists hate it, most of them. But for jazz and for vibes, you want something clean. You don't want any color at all. So, but they didn't have one, and they had me in this Fender, a twin reverb or something. And I was just new to amplifier, so I didn't really, know how to quickly. I had like 2 seconds to get my sound. So, okay, we're starting. No, fuck it. I just plugged in. And the thing, like the gain was like on 10 or something.
It's a loud amp.
It's a loud amp. And the gain was like on 10, so I go to play, and it's like, wow! It's like feeding back. And I was like, and I start playing it, because, I play. It's like an audience of like, I don't know, thousands of people, So I just start playing, and I was like, I couldn't get it to stop feeding back. So I just like, fuck it. I'll just go with it, and it's feeding back, and like, it was cool. And I started working it, and that's when I learned, wow. And then I started using effects pedals with Groove Collective and playing with distortion. And the vibes with distortion, it sounds similar to an electric guitar. It doesn't have the attack. It has more of a vibraphone attack, but the tone, when it, and you get these long sustains, it'll sustain, especially my old Deacon, which already has a ridiculously long sustain for a vibraphone anyways. And you could get these long sustains, and when you played like intervals, you'd get all these weird harmonics, and it was very cool. So I can thank my experience with John Zorn for that, because I probably would have never thought of doing that. It just happened by accident, and the accident turned out to be. But I didn't do any of that. They didn't want me to use an amp with Steely Dan. I had the vibes. I was like, it'll be a lot cleaner. But they were kind of stuck in there. They have their way, and when people have their way and they have success, they don't want to change anything.
Well, now when you were getting the complaints about adding stuff to the music, how did, like from the other band members, how did Donald Fagen react? Did he?
Well, I would have been fired if he didn't like it. So I remember that it was the end of the Madison Square Garden show that he told me that that the other band members are complaining, that this and that he was going to talk to Donald and Walter, and he'll let me know what the outcome was. So I just knew, I figured, I'm going to get fired. These guys got a lot more juice than I do. Damn, I like playing this thing. So I was very depressed after that Madison Square Garden. I'll never forget sitting in my hotel room on the floor, like totally depressed. And but then the next rehearsal, I think we had a rehearsal that week or something. I don't remember. Well, maybe it was that sound check. I don't know. He came up to me and said, "No, don't worry about it. Donald, they like what you're doing. Just keep doing what you're doing." I was like, yes! Fuck you guys. Then they accepted me more. I started becoming more friendly with some of the guys in the band. Warren and I got along real well after that. And they were like, oh, okay, well, I guess Donald, they like what he's doing. Because I guess, they had their rhythm section rehearsal, and he was very strict about super strict about what he wanted and the parts, and they have to be exact, and you know. And then I come along, you know. I'm sure that's how it looked in their eyes in retrospect, you know. Like I come along, like I'm not doing any of that. I'm doing my own thing. Fuck you, this is my band. I had that attitude. You know? Like Steely, who? I'm like this guy, Purdy. Bernard Purdy said in an interview once, like, Steely who? Me and Larry Carlton. That's Steely Dan. I have that attitude. My band now. But
you gotta bring in your signs like Purdy did. You did it. You hired the hit.
That's what I was. But it was, you know, great. Walter was really cool. He always liked me, and we got along great. Well, Walter, and he was funny. He was really, what a character. He was so, that guy is such a genius, both of them. But Walter is so observant. I mean, and I thought I was getting over sometimes, but you can't get over on that guy. He knows every little thing. He's one of those guys that's like this, and he's watching you. You know? Yeah. I see everything you're doing, dude. I'm watching you. You think I'm not watching you? I'm watching you. And one time we did a show in Seattle at the do you know the Gorge in George Washington?
I do not.
Beautiful venue, and you play at sunset, just so, and it's over like a canyon. George Washington is like mountains, and it's this beautiful, like it looks like the Grand Canyon almost, and the stage is here, and that's the backdrop, and the sunset is behind the band. Oh, wow. There's photos on the album. That's at the Gorge.
Very
this
cool.
is just the most beautiful venue, and we played there. And it was super hot that day, which, you know, kind of rare for Seattle. This was like in the 90s. It's like high 90s. It was really hot, summer day. And I used to always wear a vest with no shirt and whatever. And sometimes I used to wear these maxi skirts with cowboy boots. And some other leather pants. Well, maybe the leathers came later. I don't remember, but I used weird outfits I would wear, but usually a vest with no shirt. And then it was so hot that day. Like I'm sitting in the dressing room. My cousin lives in Seattle. He was hanging out with me, and we're hanging out, you know, smoking weed, and it was so hot. I just had this like sleeveless T-shirt on, like a vest T-shirt and boxer shorts. And I'm getting ready to change into my outfit. And I look at my outfit and I look at what I'm wearing. I'm like, they're almost identical. I was just as a goof, I'm going to go on stage in my underwear. So I did. I played on stage. You know, Walter did. Mr. I Don't Miss a Trick. He introduced me. And our great vibraphone player. You've seen him with Groove Collective, blah, blah. Tonight, the scantily clad Bill Ware. It's like, man, this guy doesn't miss a trick.
Bill wearing nothing.
That one, and my other favorite Walter introduction was Bill Ware. He's been doing a great job for us back there in percussion. And I tell you, this guy, where he starts from way out and comes back in. And I was like, well, what? And then I knew what he was talking about. He's talking. I had a featured solo on "Sign In Stranger." You know that song, "Sign In Stranger." I had a featured solo, and it's basically on like a C7 groove. You know, on a C7, C7 sharp 9 kind of thing. I would always start my show solo on the sharp 9, you know, and it's a C, so you're and I would sort of build my solo because it's "Sign In Stranger." The strangest note in, you know, on a C7 chord, it's got to be the sharp, you know, the flat 9, you know. So I would play that flat 9 C sharp right on, bam, start right there. And that's where he got that from. Starts from the out, and then I would work my way back in. I was like, man, this guy is he's so amazing. Yeah. And it was always like that with him. He had these insights that were just, he was an amazing guy. I got a little closer with him in Japan. We did 2 weeks or 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 3 weeks, I think it was, in Japan. And one of the venues we played in, we had 2 nights in the same venue, which was odd, first of all. And then it was 1,500 seater. Yet we were making the same money there. So imagine how much those tickets were. And some people paid for 2 nights. They paid for both nights, even though we were playing pretty much the same music both nights. They were like, hey, "What? This is once in a lifetime chance." I mean, how many? That's probably right. They were right too. I mean, they haven't got back to Japan, I don't think, Steely Dan. So they knew it was a once in a. So I can only imagine those tickets were probably $1,000 each or something. Crazy.
Yeah. No, I mean, so much cool stuff. I wish we had more time. I know we're gonna have to get wrapping up kind of soon. I mean, let us know at any point if you'd like to start. But one of the topics I wanted to touch on while you're here is, I mean, like I said, you are on some very historically important hip hop albums, and I was curious what your perception of the culture of hip hop was as it was emerging, and then what it was like. Kind of going between like the jazz scene and the hip hop scene, and what kind of judgment you got on both sides.
Yeah, well,
like for mixing things.
I did a lot of crossover stuff because, like in the 90s, the whole acid jazz thing was coming along and starting to mix, dance with DJs. DJs were just coming into their own as kind of like being their own thing, And nowadays, some of those DJs make a lot more money than musicians make.
Yeah. Well, people people complain about DJs now, so I can only imagine back then you were getting some shit for getting involved in scenes like that.
Well, not so much, because everybody was, especially the jazz musicians are generally more open to, you got just some of the guys, staunch kind of, conservative musically. We called them bebop Nazis. They were like, they're still a term, right? Yeah, they're still around. Those kind of like anything else is crap. I was kind of in that camp, but I was always open to a lot of different things, especially coming from the composer in me, curious about what makes something what it is. What makes classical music classical music? What makes country music country? What makes it, those are scientific kind of things that composers are interested in. So in that way, most of the musicians, certainly that I was dealing with, like, the avant-garde guys and the crossover people and the Knitting Factory scene was all of that. So that whole scene I was in was very open to. So that's great. That's anything you did was cool. So in that effect, it didn't, I didn't see that much like flack from it. Never paid much attention to like music writers, because half the time they don't seem to like know what they're doing even, or what they're talking about. So I didn't, critics and all that, so I barely paid any attention to that. Although they seem to love us and they loved me. And so Steely Dan, actually, a lot of the early critics, they got panned a lot of times. They're like, they're just rehashing, it's just a cover band of their own music, and all those stupid comments, but they loved me and they loved Drew Zing, so we would get a lot of the good press would be like, but that Bill Ware and Drew Zing, what standouts, they were amazing. So I did a lot of that stuff. I played with all these, Groove Collective kind of led to that, because there were little breakdowns, where we would do. I did a gig once with Kim Clark, bass player, and
Rozelle from The Roots?
Yeah,
from The Roots. Shit, I didn't know that.
Amazing. That guy is ridiculous.
He's awesome, yeah.
And we did this little gig. It was in this weird club where they had music downstairs and us on one other level and someone else on another level. And it was just the three of us, and it sounded like a jazz quartet, because he could do drums and like a harmon mute trumpet like Miles. He could do them both at the same time.
You ever heard Question versus Rozelle off The Roots' like first album? It's just him and Questlove playing drums, and he's doing beatboxing, and he's doing like horn and bass lines with his voice, and he's doing like a James Brown impression. It's like,
it's ridiculous all at the same time. Like is that one person? It was like magic, but it was one of the coolest gigs I ever did. It sounded so cool. It sounded like it sounded like that Man with the Horn Miles record. It sounded like that. Oh, it was just so cool. And then those gigs were kind of fun, but after like, I don't know, a couple of years of that, man, especially me in my youth and my brash attitude that I used to have, it's mellowed down now somewhat. I hated rappers. I hate poets and I hate rappers because those are the most full shit dudes you ever want to meet, talking all this brother stuff, and then they turn around and rip you off for like $20. I mean, they were some of the cheapest, like Coochie Frito, Chitlin Circuit type mentality dudes I ever met, and most of the time it was not. I did some great stuff too with like people like Gary Glazer. I don't know if you know him, a poet. We did a whole tour at the Knitting Factory and Dodge Vibe. Remember the Dodge Vibe?
No.
It was a little minivan. It was called the Vibe. And so,
Vibe.
Dodge came, why don't you take one of our vans and do a poetry slam across the country with the vibraphone and the Vibe? Like somehow Michael Dorf sold that. Michael Dorf could sell anything, but he sold that too. And we went across the country. And Gary Glazer, I think, was the poet and announcer and MC, and we had a engineer/driver, Ed Greer, who works with Michael for years, doing construction, sound engineering, helping the sound, building the new city winery. But yeah, he helped build do the sound there, and a great guy. Him and his wife, Sasha von Ortsen. She was the engineer for many of the Vibes records that I did on Knitting Factory, because she worked as a house engineer for Knitting Factory for years, and also for Michael. They were on that thing, and that was fun. That poetry slam tour was really fun. But a lot of those poets, oh my God. Talk about jive. That was like some of the worst experiences I ever had. Poets and rappers. And so by like a couple of years of that, and I was like, don't even talk to me if you're a poet or a rapper. You guys are so full of it. I mean, blah, 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 blah. Now you're all talking. It's just like so jive. But, that was a lot of my experience. But I did a whole bunch of things, places. CeCe Peniston, David Byrne recorded on a record. Awful human being, that guy. The most hated celebrity. That's it. That guy.
I know that name. I don't know.
David Byrne. Talking Heads.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't really know any Talking Heads.
Good. Awful music. Awful. I hate it. I hate that kind of singing. Awful. But other people, he was one bad experience. But other people. Great experience. Debbie Harry, toured with her for years. She's great, unbelievable. Just a quick story with her. We did a rehearsal in the Lower East Side, and she knew I was struggling financially at the time, so she was like, I drove my car to the rehearsal. You want to put your Vibes in the trunk, and then I'll just bring them to the gig tomorrow. It'll save you, because I used to cart I didn't have couldn't have my Vibes where I was living as a fourth floor walk up or something, tiny little apartment. So I kept them in a storage place, and that's where I also did my rehearsing and stuff. So she said, it'll save you. And I had the Vibes carded, and it'll save you cartage. I was like, oh, great, sure.
Very nice.
So we arranged, time to meet and everything. And that was before cell phones and everything. I didn't have a cell phone, so that was like 95 maybe or something. I don't know, 97, something like that. And so I showed up like I was 10 minutes late, and Debbie's very punctual, so it was obvious. Oh shit, she's not. I'm standing out at 7th Avenue South. I'm standing outside 7th Avenue South. No car. Shit, she must have. Damn, I missed it. I'm probably have to go to the parking lot, get the Vibes, and I'm like thinking that, right? So I go in the club. The Vibes are on stage, set up.
No.
She brought him in. I got the People Helper Center. They were all set up for me when I got there. That's the kind of superstar she is, you know. And Elvis, another great guy. I mean, Elvis. And
I was just listening to the Jazz Passengers track featuring Elvis Costello. What was it called?
Black Velvet, I think.
No.
With Tim and Debbie doing a duo? No. Think of Me? No, he didn't record that.
What's it called? I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the track, but...
Yeah, he did a duo with Debbie, and we did that. We ended up doing that, I think, on a Letterman show.
Oh, that's cool.
That was very cool.
Wind Walked By.
Yeah, The Wind Walked By. Yes, he sung that one. But Elvis, amazing dude, and that guy was so funny. He's so busy all the time. He's one of those crazy guys. He keeps himself like insanely busy, and he would always come into rehearsal like with his coat on. Like rehearsals at 9. It's like 8. You know, it's 8:59, and here comes Elvis. I'm sorry, I'm late. You know, he's taking off his coat. Like, oh, what are we playing? What do you want us to do first? While he's taking his coat off. Think of Me. Okay, well, here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Think of Me, and he went bam, like right on. I mean, he could like run in, you know, grab a quick drink of water, and bam, just and be right smack on the note, like. Every time, and like every single time, he was always like 2 minutes before he was needed, he was there, like just in time. And okay, here we go, 1, 2, 3, bam. That was like our Elvis joke.
Yeah,
for years. But another great guy, really talented, amazing guy.
Another one of the albums I was curious about was classic. Hip-hop album Uptown Saturday Night by Camp Lo.
That's in the I don't remember zone. All right. I did at one point I remember I had done 50 Sideman CDs. You know what? I remember 2 of them. One because of that awful experience with David Byrne, and where he ripped me off, actually. Didn't pay me for the recording. I did a whole album. He didn't pay me. The guys got problems. If you're listening, I'm still mad at you. That wasn't even the worst of it. The fact that he stole the music that I was recording from another vibraphone player, ripped the recording off, and then told me, oh, we just don't like her feel, so we want you to replace her parts that she wrote, actually. And it was I ended up taking part in some musical theft, and that really did not sit well. I didn't find out for years later, but that did not sit well with me. That guy. Not good.
Fuck you, Dave Byrne.
Oh my goodness.
I got my revenge on him one time. I see, because he rides a bike, you know, 'cause it's too cheap to use like a cab or anything. No. Millionaire riding a bike in Manhattan. He passed me one time. I ride a bike too, but not for that reason. I was riding a bike because I can't walk anymore. And I spit right in his face. That was my moment of, yes, there's my revenge.
Just a regular day in New York.
Talking Head meet the
thousands he stole from me, but it did give me some little.
Yeah,
it's the little
30
things.
seconds of joy. It's the little things in life that you go, oh yeah, I'll never forget that.
Too bad there was no COVID then. Dude.
All right, there's $1 million spit right there.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's literally too many amazing projects you've been a part of that I would love to talk about. Is there anyone that you know, to this day, like still dream of working with or meeting, or who is still keeping you inspired?
I mean, you got the Mink and the Monk podcast off your list. What else? What else are you dealing with?
Oh, I don't know. I not really. I mean, you know, I would love to do some more gigs with people. Like I played with I seem to play with band members, like people who are just right at the end of their career, and I play with them and then they die. So that's not such a
so we're
maybe
not
I shouldn't let that rumor out there. Nobody will hire me then, but no. But I played with a great bass player, Mickey Bass. He played with, you know, Blakey and all these people. I mean, top level bebop guy, and that was a real pleasure. The band was amazing, and great experience playing with people like that, you know, that have been around, but there aren't that many of them left. You know, they're all old. They're so old now. But lots of people. I'm looking forward to maybe playing with Joe Lovano some more. He sat in with when Steve Williams, also a drummer, tell you about. He sat in that same gig at Barnstock. Joe Lovano sat in with us, and
it's a super bad dude.
Yeah, we played together a long time ago. We played in a thing with, it was mainly the jazz, sort of like some of the Jazz Passengers guys, and we did an Eric Dolphy song, and Joe, they paired Joe up with us so he would have some people to play with, and we got to play together then. That was a long time. It was like 1995 or something. The Knitting Factory's 20th anniversary or something. I don't know, in 97, I don't remember when it was, but we got to play together then. And then not again until just this year. Barnstock get to play, so I'm looking forward to. I'm hoping to record some of those original 200 songs. They're just aching to be recorded. So I'm going to do a record, hopefully of my own. So I look forward to that. But it would be nice to. I don't think it'll ever happen, but it'd be nice to play with Steely Dan again, you know. I mean, the new band is really cool. When we had it, was just 3 tenors, you know. They have the horn ring there with some really great players there. I certainly wouldn't turn that down if that opportunity came again. That music is just so much fun.
Yeah.
I've been playing with some local bands, some cover bands that cover some of that material, so that's been foray into, but mostly I've been playing with straight ahead stuff, so, which is my love, you know, my original love. So, I don't really, mostly, film scoring. I think next to playing just bebop with an amazing group is probably my first love, but I think my second love, or maybe even right along there with that, is film scoring. Film scoring is just like, you feel like a god when you're writing film. You know, you're writing music to a film. It's just like, it's such amazing work putting music to images and creating this musical world in this film that is its own world. It's just nothing more satisfying than that. And I got to do a silent film, which is like all music, none of this pesky acting and dialogue and sound effect garbage to get in your way. It's just your music and the film, and it's fantastic. That's really like the epitome of it. And this film was from 1928, I think, and it was a whole lot of things about that make an amazing movie. The fact that it was directed and the script was written by women, which is very rare in the 20s, and it featured. It was a full-length feature that had a woman as the main protagonist. Unheard of, you know. Paula Negri, you heard of her? She was the actress and the silent film actress with that curl. The black curl. They made the cartoon Betty Boop after her. She had Paula Negri is her name. She was a Polish actress and very famous in the silent film. I think she was partnered with her. I don't know if they were ever married, but she was with Rudolph Valentino. They originally made the movie Spanish Dancer for him, and then he couldn't do it because of contractual problems, and they ended up reworking the script. They got a female writer, reworked the script to be about Paula Negri to be the main protagonist. And all the men are very silly in that movie. It's a very subtly 1920s, but it's a feminist movie, it really is. And they filmed the movie, I found out this later, to music. What? They actually had music played while they filmed it because they wanted it to have a musical sensibility, which makes it really easy to put music to because you can feel the tempo. That's the whole thing about scoring. You got to feel the tempo of what's going on the screen. And they edit movies to time. Right. So it's very timed, and it's very much about timing. So once you get the timing of it, and then I found out later, I was like, why is the timing seems really easy in this movie? I'm finding no problem finding the tempo of this of these scenes. And there's some dance scenes, you know, and there's nothing, you're like, but it could feel the tempo of it. And that's why I found out later after I scored it that they had filmed it 2 times. So I didn't wonder why it's so easy. Everything flows like, but an hour and 45 minutes of music.
Oh my God!
Wow.
Months and months of writing, and
Well, for someone who composes 200 songs a year,
yeah, dropping the bucket.
no big deal.
But that was really. It's out. It's going to be out on Blu-ray soon. But it's called The Spanish Dancer.
The Spanish Dancer.
Yeah, The Spanish Dancer.
I'll look for it.
Milestone Films.
Okay.
And so out of the albums that you've been, the older albums that you've been releasing recently, what are some of the more recent ones, or is there any in particular you want people to?
Yeah, well, I did an acoustic jazz record, which is similar to Chick Corea's acoustic band. I was trying to, go in that vibe with the Ratso B. Harris on bass, and Steve Sandberg on piano, Steve Johns on drums, and myself on vibes. It's called Acoustic, Club Bird Acoustic. That record I released, and that was pretty cool. And then I have an electric version that is all me, called Club Bird Electric. And that one I recorded in my home studio, overdub style, obviously, because you can't play more than one instrument at a time. Yeah. But that one, and then I have a whole bebop record that I did. Jamie Afamato on drums. He had a club in Brooklyn called Puppets Jazz Bar for a while. I'm wearing the Puppet records. We had a record company together for a minute, and we did a couple of records with Arturo O'Farrell and Alex Blake on bass, Jamie on drums, myself on piano. We did, and on bass, on vibes, and Matt King also did one record with us on piano. So those records were fun to do, and but I released a bunch of stuff just with no label. It's all on. You can find it on Spotify if you look for Bill Ware. So slowly releasing that. I have a whole nother album, 51 Minutes of Madness, I did with my Urban Vibes, I call it, group. That was a DJ. Started out with a DJ, a guitarist, me. Then I had a drummer that I was doing gigs with. He was like, "Oh, I want to come sit in," and he brought a percussionist. Sit in turned into the whole gig.
Wow.
Every gig. We had a weekly gig at a place called the Ace of Clubs on like Jones Street in St. Jones.
I think that's the name of the.
It used to be Acme Underground, and then it became the Ace of Clubs, and there was a Cajun restaurant above, Louisiana style restaurant above. So we had a weekly gig there every Thursday, and I recorded it, and then I just learned how to mix the last 2 years. I've been studying engineering. I learned how to mix and master. So I mixed and mastered this. After 2006 we recorded it, and it's taken me 109 tracks. It's taken me this long to get it all together, so I finally finished that. So that I'll be releasing pretty soon too.
51 Minutes of Madness.
51 Minutes of Madness.
Okay.
It's like we used to play continuous. We play for 2-3 hours straight, continuous music. Mark Rebo played with us. We have a lot of guitarists. Eventually, the band swelled up to be 2 drummers, DJ, vibes, guitar, bass, 2 singers. And one night we had 5 saxophone players and a rapper.
The jam.
So it was anybody could sit in, and we were jamming along with the DJ. Except the DJ spun music that the DJ and I put together during the day. We would get together and we would put together a playlist of music and make our own tracks. And he had Ableton Live, so he could. If there was a bass player, he'd just take the bass out.
Very cool.
Drummer, whatever we needed. That was I want to revive that concept, hopefully with another DJ.
Yeah. Oh, I'm excited to hear the record when it comes out. I'm excited to hear the new Jazz Passengers record that you guys are about to make also. So I hope the listeners will keep an eye out for that. And just, you have so much cool stuff out on streaming platforms. So anywhere, just look up Bill Ware and you'll find a lot of cool stuff.
Easily. I'm an Aquarian. Next.
But no, I really enjoyed researching your work, and it's such a fascinating career, and you're always welcome back to talk, because I could keep going on. I have more questions. But
60 years, you get a lot of stories after a while. You know?
But seriously, man, it was an honor. Thank you so much for coming to talk to us.
Thank you for doing it.
You know, follow Bill. You know, are you on Instagram or YouTube particularly?
Yeah, my YouTube channel. You know, all the usual.
Check him out. Subscribe to him. Subscribe to us. Like the video. Comment on the video. And thank you for listening. Yes, it's been an honor, Bill. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for doing it.
All right.
We do it?
Yeah.
Nope.
Thank you.